I'm going to assume that you're here because you've decided you don't want to embrace the full Amish lifestyle. If there's a disaster or any kind of tragedy that caused the grid to not be available to you in your area, that you would like to have electricity of some sort to run the things in your home, to give you water, to give you light, to keep your food at the proper temperatures, and you want to do that with electricity. And that's why you're here, because I want to share with you today the 5 reasons why we think solar power using an inverter and battery backups are superior to using a gas, a diesel, or a propane generator. Now, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. I'm going to tell you all 5 reasons right now. And then as we go on through the video, I will explain those reasons. And I'll also share with you our story of how we went from being completely on the grid to less than 2 years later, completely off the grid. My name is Jessie. This is The Boring Country Life. And these are the 5 reasons that we would recommend a solar power system over a fuel-powered generator for grid down situations. Number 1, it's silent. Number 2, there's no fuel needed. Number 3, it is clean power. Number 4, if you do have a fuel-powered generator, you can actually get more efficient use out of it by using it with a solar system. And number 5, you're going to get continual benefits. Plus 5.2 is you can be expandable with your solar system. You don't have to jump into something large. You can start small. So those are the 5 reasons. And now let's talk about it. The first 2 things that I would recommend if you are getting involved with anything solar power for the first time, number 1 is to know everything you can about it. There is so much free information on YouTube. My husband learned probably 95% of what he needed to know in order to build our solar power system just from watching YouTube videos. Other than that, he just spent some time talking to people on the phone that offer those products to make sure he understood all the aspects and he was doing stuff right. But number 1, get the education. Make sure you really understand it. If you have bukus of money, pay someone else to install it for you. Pay them to service it. But in a disaster situation, is their company going to be coming to your house to service the solar system if something goes wrong, if something trips, if a fuse breaks? It's really, really important for you to know all that information so that you can take care of it just like you would in your own home if something went wrong. And the second important thing I would personally recommend is that you do all of your expenses with cash. Don't get involved with solar power if you have to borrow the money for it. Life is already stressful enough without adding payments to something. And then if it breaks and you're still making payments on it, that would be infuriating. So understand solar power as best you can. You will learn along the way. You don't have to know absolutely everything in the beginning. You will learn more as you go, and pay cash. Now we've got those 2 recommendations out of the way. I also want to clarify, I'm just a housewife. I don't really understand our solar system. I think my husband is talking a foreign language when he tries to explain it to me, but he also doesn't know how to make bread. So we just take care of each other in that aspect. But this video is really just my opinions. They're worth what you paid for them. And it is my experience of living with our entire home running on solar power for more than 2 years now. Let me move around a little bit, get the sun out of my face. Okay, so enough jabber. The first reason that we would recommend a solar power system in any kind of disaster situation or grid down is that it is silent. Do you need me to point out to you the reasons why you would want to have power and have it be silent? I hope not. Enough said, right? I can move on. Silent. Makes no noise. Okay, number 2, you don't need fuel. You are not going to be driving in your vehicle, if you can drive in your vehicle, and waiting in long lines for gas or fuel. You're not going to have to store any fuel at your home and hope it stays fresh and hope it doesn't run out if the disaster lasts a long time. There's no fuel needed for your solar power system. It is going to keep running. Even on a partially cloudy day, you're going to be getting enough power in for what you need to run whatever you want to run in your home. Not needing fuel also means you're not going to have any more costs related to running the solar power system either. Okay? Any questions? Ask in the comments. The third reason I would recommend a solar power system in a grid down situation is that it is clean power. You don't have to worry about how the electricity is going up and down. I think that's called the sine wave. It's not going to fry your electronics in your house, which a fuel power generator can do, especially if you've purchased an inexpensive one. It can damage your refrigerator, freezers. It can damage anything you're running on it if the power isn't really steady all the time. So you're not going to have a problem with that with a quality inverter. It's going to keep the power steady, and you're not going to have lights, going up and down. You're not going to have your compressors going up and down in your electronics. You don't have that risk with the solar power. If you think that's wrong, let me know. Again, I'm just a housewife. I don't know a whole lot, but I do know I don't worry about anything in my house. And we run on solar power full time, and I would be worried about the electronics in my house if we were running a generator full time or even for a few hours a day. The fourth reason that we would recommend solar power is that even if you still had a fuel powered generator, you can buddy that up with the solar power system and get much more efficient use out of the fuel that you're putting in that generator. So I'm going to try to explain this, so like other housewives can understand. So if you have a 5,000 watt generator, okay, that means when it's running, you can plug in enough appliances that reach the 5,000 limit. So if your refrigerator is 1,000 watts and your well pump is 3,000 watts, that gets you up to 4,000. And then you want to run some lights and a toaster. I don't know. You can do all that with your 5,000 watt generator. But say you're running the generator and you're only running the refrigerator, or like the refrigerator is cycling. So when it cycles on, it uses a little more. And then when it's just maintaining the temperature, it uses less. So if you're only using 1,000 watts of power, but you're running this 5,000 watt generator, all that fuel it's burning, it's not producing anything on the other end. And you can have generators that will idle down a little bit, but you're still not going to use that fuel really efficiently. Does that make sense? With the inverter on the solar power, you can plug your generator into the inverter. And we actually did this in September because it was cloudy and rainy for so long, over 2 weeks, that our batteries just kept dropping lower and lower towards the end of the month. And in the last 2 days or so of the month, we ran the generator just because it needed exercising anyway, and I refused to turn the grid on, even though we can turn it on. The generator is plugged into the inverter, and if it's running, say it's another 5,000 watt generator, it's putting the full 5,000 watts of power into the battery bank. So every bit of that power is being stored in the battery bank, and then in your home, as you're using the different levels of electronic devices, it's just pulling what it needs. Are you housewives following? It's not that complicated, really. Just make sure your husband understands what he's doing and nothing in the house gets blown up, okay? The fifth reason, and I kind of break it down into 2 points, is you're going to get continual benefits from having a solar power system. So the simplest way to think of this is when people ask us, how long is it going to take to pay that system off? Well, I would ask this question back. How long will it take you to pay off the money that you spent buying a fuel-powered generator? And the answer would be, you're never going to pay it off because you have to keep buying fuel. You have to keep maintaining and maintaining oil changes, whatever else that generator needs. So a fuel-powered generator is really just there for a disaster insurance policy, right? It's there for the disaster. It's just to see you through, and you will feel like whether you paid $2,000 or $5,000 or a whole lot more if you have a whole house propane generator, you'll feel like, well, it was worth it because it got us through that 1 week of no power, right? But with the solar power generator, you're going to keep using that generator every day. Our generator runs 365 days a year, our solar inverter. It's not really a generator. Maybe it is. I don't know. Ask my husband. It runs all year long. It's going to run for 10 or 20 or 30 years. So it will actually pay itself off. The continual benefit of the solar power is not only is it available for the disaster when the grid goes down, but it's available all year long. So for instance, you don't have to have a 20,000 watt system that can run your entire house. You could have a 6,000 watt system, okay? 6,000 watt inverter, have a few batteries available, have a few solar panels, start out small, okay? And the power that that solar system generates can run 6,000 watts worth of electricity in your home every day of the year, not just during an emergency. So if you have a well like we do and a well pump, if you have a high efficiency water heater, you could have those things plugged in. You could have your fridges plugged in. You can choose what you want. You could have those attached to the inverter system and they will run on solar power all year long. So they're saving you all year long. If you had a fuel power generator, if you had a whole house propane generator, would you want that running all year long? No, it's costing you money, right? Every minute it runs, it's costing you money in fuel. So you actually don't want that to run all the time because it's costing you money as it runs. Whereas the solar power system, even a small one, is saving you money as it runs all year long, okay? And it's there for you in an emergency just to keep the basics running for you, just with a small system, okay? So 5.2 of the reasons why we would recommend this is solar is expandable. Okay, you can sister up generators, fuel power generators. You can make fuel power generators expandable too, but the solar power system can start small. You can have a 3,000 watt. You could have something just to have your fridges going. That's it. And as you save up, you can add another inverter and another inverter. Or you could sell the ones you've had, buy a bigger inverter, but your batteries you can keep stacking and stacking. And that's what we did over about 2 years. We kept adding more batteries, adding more panels until we had enough to be completely off the grid. That means you don't need to invest $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 just to get started, just to have that security if the grid is not available, if it were to go down, if you had a disaster in your area. And not only are you helpful to your family, which God expects you to be, but you are helpful to other people and other neighbors that may need to share, that may need you to charge something for them, to get water for them. So that's how we really got pushed into the point that we're at now. We had a major power loss here in, it was January, I think, maybe the end of January of 2022. We had a really big snowstorm. Let me back up a little more. As we've had the money, we have tried to add things to our property, to our lifestyle, to help us be more resilient, more independent, more self-sufficient. And some of those things are, we just had a wood stove in our previous house 12, 13 years ago. And when we built this house 10 years ago, we got a cook stove. So not only can we heat the entire house, and we do every year, all winter long, we don't use our heat pump. We do have a central heat pump and we don't use it. We choose to use the wood. It feels so much nicer. And, you know, we build muscles, we build skills. Every year I learn to cook more on the cook stove. In this house, we installed a hand pump on our well. We've always been looking for more ways to have resiliency. You know, I have a lot of devices I can use if there's no electric available to still manage our days and keep cooking and making food and doing laundry and things like that. And we looked into solar, I don't know, maybe 2016, 2017, and it just seemed very expensive. And because of that, we kind of settled on, you know, all we really need is to keep the fridges running. If the power's out for a week, because the house we live in now, this power company is, like, the power goes out all the time. Like, the wind can blow a little too hard and the power goes out here. Our last house wasn't like that. We never lost power at our last house unless it was like a Category 5 hurricane, like when Isabel came through in the early 2000s here in Virginia. But we realized when we looked into solar way back when, the cost of it was really expensive. We didn't have a good understanding of it. And all we would really need, because we have so many other systems set up, all we really needed was a way to keep the refrigerators running and to be able to pump the water out of our well and just, run the lights in the living room before bed. If we could do those three things, the refrigerators and freezers, the well, and a few lights, we would be content. And so we just decided, we'll get a decent generator and we'll just run that if we have to. And we did, because the power goes out here really often. But then in early 2022, we had a snowstorm here that was really bad. Not really bad. I mean, it's Virginia. And the power was out for over a week, maybe 7-8 days. It wasn't just out for us. It was out for every single person on our street. It was out for all the people on the connecting roads. We are in a rural area. It takes a while for the electric companies to get through and clear all the lines when trees are down. So all of our relatives within 5-10 miles, they were all out of power the entire time. So there was no one to turn to when we needed stuff, or we needed help with water or refrigerators and freezers. Because what happened was, okay, the generator, we turned it on, day one when the power went out, and that worked for 24, 36 hours. And then something happened in the generator and it stopped working. And we didn't panic. That's okay. Honey, you have time. You can work on it. I'll just put the cold stuff from the fridges outside. We've got the pump on the well. I can pump water. We're still warm because we have the cook stove. No problem. And then within about 12 hours, it wasn't even that long, the pump on the well broke, like the hand pump. It broke. And now we have no generator, no hand pump for the well. Luckily, there was lots of snow outside. And so the kids and I were collecting buckets and buckets and buckets of snow and melting it on the cook stove just to have all the extra water we needed for non-drinking stuff. So like toilets and dishwashing and hand washing, because I did have water set aside for drinking already. Again, we couldn't go to our neighbors for water because even our neighbor with the propane whole house generator had an issue, and his, whatever it did, it broke. Like he didn't even have power for his house. And my husband ended up going in shortly after the well pump handle broke and just bought a new, more expensive generator. He was like, forget this. I'm just getting a bigger, better generator. And so we do still have that generator to this day. And that is what we use for our backup to the solar power system. And that got us through the rest of the week without power. Once that was settled, the frustration that my husband had with not being able to provide what we needed to keep our house running drove him to the internet to learn more about solar power. So he still had an interest in solar. He still wanted to have solar power tools, and he figured if he could just figure out how to have enough solar, like we said, just to run the fridges, just to pump the well, if we could just do those two things and a few lights, then he could probably manage. Like he could learn it. And so he spent hours and weeks. And as he learned and as he figured stuff out, he started making a list of all the stuff that he would need to buy and researching which products were good and this and that. And he's made a plan, how he was going to put the solar panels up. With our son's help, he built, we call it our solar shed or our solar barn, with the solar panels as the roof. And I've done a video on that and showed pictures of that construction before. I can link it towards the end, or at the end of this video if you want to see it. But I'm pretty boring when I talk about that stuff. If you're still here, congratulations. This is the boring country life. Anyway, so he started putting together the solar power system that we thought would be just for emergency backup, like 3 batteries, an inverter, and the panels. He did build it knowing he could expand it. So he bought more panels than, he oversized the system for it, knowing that as we had the funds, we would like to buy more batteries, because the more batteries you have, the longer you can go on cloudy days and rainy days and whatnot. So it was April of 2022 that he flipped the switch and our house was at least partially running on solar power. And so for the rest of 2022, as he finished more of the system, added things in, got more wiring going, we kept running the house more and more on the solar power. January 2023, we decided we wanted to see how long we could go on our system. We just turned the grid off and we said we're just going to run our system with our batteries and see how long it lasts. And each month it would change depending on the temperatures. If we were out of town, we would turn the grid back on. If it was cloudy for multiple days in a row, we might need the grid for a day or two. So I did this really long, boring graph and showed you how much electric we used each month from the grid, and how much it cost us last year. I think it was around $600. And then this year, in 2024, we've added more batteries and been able to go even longer. Anyway, that's how we're doing with solar right now. So for those of you that have been wondering if solar is a good idea, it doesn't have to be a political discussion. And I get a little irritated hearing some YouTubers make solar power a political discussion. Like, we're talking about saving people's lives right now, as you can see, after the hurricanes that came through. And we're also talking about people that aren't ready to choose and maybe don't ever want to choose to live an Amish lifestyle. I do a lot of things different from modern Americans living in the suburbs and the cities, but that doesn't mean I want to live an Amish lifestyle. I still would like to have electricity for as long as possible. So I'm not ready to just give that up. There's nothing any more evil about solar power than there is about any other technology that we use. I think it's morally neutral. How you choose to use it, yes, you can do evil, you can do good, the internet, all that stuff. But it's just a new technology, and you don't have to be afraid of it, but it is really good to understand it. And you can take advantage of it, and it can be very, very helpful. You see people all over now because of the hurricanes and because they're getting attention and lots of YouTube videos. People appreciate having those foldable solar power panels and being able to plug something in and get their phones charged. My point is, solar power is not evil, okay? It doesn't mean someone has blue hair and wants the globalists to take over. It's just another means of controlling your own environment a little better and being a little more independent, because I know people are hurting. People have lost their loved ones. They have lost their homes. They have lost very important stability. I'm not saying having solar power is going to replace any of that stability, but it can bring a lot of normalcy back for the people that have lost normal. Don't diss the solar power. It's very valuable.